We live in an era today where the political climate is so toxic that people who love this country, and when I mean love, meaning that they love to vote, are now being completely turned off from going out and voting. In 2016, the election between Donald Trump, the president, and Hillary Clinton was so toxic that many people stayed home, or did they? Critics, whether it was the everyday person that gets up and go to work, or it was these so-called experts on television, political analysts, all said the reason why Donald Trump won was because a lot of people stayed home. 60% of the people in America went out and voted in 2016. Do you want to know the rate of people that went out and voted in 1972? 60%. 60% of Americans go out and vote every presidential election. The only time they had an uptick in this country that the presidential election had a higher voter turnout was the first election of President Barack Obama. And then during his second term, it went right back down to 60%. So it's not that the reason because it's so toxic or how Donald Trump won. Donald Trump tapped into a fear, an anger, a hatred that still permeates this country. You see, Barack Obama said, during when he spoke for Mr. Kerry, who ran against George Bush the second time, he said that we are not, a blue state or a red state, we're the United States. And that resonated with people because people finally started thinking that he gave the hope that finally we were going to get elected officials who actually didn't care whether you were black, white, Asian, gay, straight, poor, wealthy, that everybody in America was going to get a shot at great opportunities. That politics would no longer be so toxic, and yet here we are. The interesting thing is it wasn't always that way. And I mean, when Ronald Reagan was president of the United States, and Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House, who's considered the greatest Speaker of the House this country has ever produced, they worked together, even though they were on opposite sides. When Ronald Reagan was shot, as he was recovering, there were two people in his bedroom, in his room, recovery room, every day. One was his wife, Nancy Reagan, the other one was Tip O'Neill. And when Reagan started talking to Tip O'Neill about, maybe we need to start working together, his attitude was, I don't want to talk about that now. Let's get you on the road to recovery. And for the rest of those years of Reagan when he was in office, he worked with Democrats, and things got done. And then came the advent of Newt Gingrich in 1994, who basically he held the Republican Party hostage, and it's been that way ever since. You see, there was a time when the Republicans and Democrats would have lunch together, they would have dinner together. When Newt Gingrich became Speaker of the House in 1994, he told all the Republicans that anybody that get caught having lunch or a powwow with a Democrat, he would make sure that they would not get any funding for re-election, and that he would run candidates against them. So that's the toxic that we are seeing in our country today. We should have elected officials who care about one thing, making sure that everyone gets the services that they need. As a former candidate as a state representative here in Philadelphia, I ran a campaign on making sure bridging the gap with poverty, addressing the poverty, the unemployment, the violence, and the illiteracy rate in the community, in the district, because those four horsemen of the apocalypse was destroying and continues to destroy the community, which has permeated the violence. How much violence? In 2017, in 2017, of the 300 murders that occurred in Philadelphia, half of them happened in the area where I now reside. No one is holding elected officials accountable. My philosophy has always been that if you don't hold an elected official accountable, they won't be. They'll continue to get elected over and over and not serve the will of the people. You see, the elected official was not elected for we the people to serve them, but the other way around, for the elected officials to serve the people. So as this 2020 election comes upon us, and that we're watching debates with the Democratic Party go back and forth, and ultimately somebody, I guess, will try to run in a Republican side that will try to run against Donald Trump. I'd like to see more elected officials decide that, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore if we truly can't help every American. We live in a country where people go to bed hungry every night. We live in a country where a large population of Americans are homeless. And we're not just talking about adults, we're talking about children. We're talking about teenagers. Any child that couch surfs is homeless. The drug addiction is overwhelming, and we're not addressing it holistically. We're not addressing it aggressively. This is yet America's second time in the last 30 years to address a scourge, this time the opioid, and they're failing like they failed the crack epidemic of the late 80s and 90s. Only through strength, intelligence, and compassion for every American in this country can we truly be a United States of America.